issue.
Well, to get more on this, we are now joined by Jack Parrock, who is in Brussels for us, and Coletta Wanjoy, who is in Addis Ababa. First to you, Jack, in Brussels, the EU and AU gathering came close to endorsing the presidential election results in the DR Congo. What more can you tell us about this?
Indeed, a very lukewarm sort of embrace of the potential president. There have been concerns here in Europe, as there have been in the African Union, about the result of the decision from the Constitutional Court in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The African Union, in fact, obviously asked them to delay the decision, and the European Union has very much backed the African Union throughout this whole process. Interesting to note that the DRC threw out the EU's ambassador in the run-up to the election, meaning that the European Union has been a bit legless on the ground in the Democratic Republic of Congo in the wake of this election result, meaning that the European Union has basically had to follow the AU. Now, what they've said today is that they essentially look and that they noted the decision of the African Union, of the Constitutional Court in the DRC, and that they will basically look into probably working with the new president, Felix Tshisekedi. We'll have to wait and see how far that goes, whether that is really accepted, because obviously this is still a disputed election result.
Over to you now, Coletta. The African Union had initially called for the postponement of the DRC election results. Do you think this position has changed after the court verdict in favour of Tshisekedi?
Well, Karen, there is nothing much the African Union can do about that, because the DRC decided to go ahead and uphold the decision by its constitutional court. However, what the African Union can do is continue monitoring the situation in the DRC, and it's giving itself a window period up to when the summit will meet in February here in Addis Ababa and discuss. That is when they'll receive a progress report from the DRC and see where the DRC stands as far as transition of power is concerned. But at the moment, we know that the AU high-level delegation that was supposed to be led by the AU chair, who is also the Rwanda president, Paul Kagame, as well as the AU Commission Chair, Musa Faki Mahamat, has postponed its visit to the DRC. So probably that we shall see that visit happening after February, after the AU has assessed the progress of transition of power in the DRC.
Okay, thank you, Coletta. We'll return to you in a moment. Now back to you, Jack, in Brussels. Is the EU likely, do you think, to extend its full support to Felix Tshisekedi once he's sworn in as the DRC president?
Very difficult to say. There may be individual European countries who are willing to do so, and we'll have to wait and see if national capitals break with the European Union. At the moment, I don't think you can expect Federica Mogherini, the EU foreign policy chief, to be attending any inauguration events, or in fact congratulating Felix Tshisekedi on his win in this election as deemed by the Constitutional Court. There are still a lot of concerns about the result, and still a lot of concerns here in the European Union about the opposition complaints about how that election was contested and how the result was decided. So we'll have to wait and see how the EU decides to play this, because while it is concerned about the result, it does want to have a strong hand and be a strong player in Central Africa, in the Democratic Republic of Congo going forward. It's a difficult hand for the EU to play, and the way that they're doing it at the moment, and we've seen that very clearly today, is to stay very strongly on the side of the African Union and allow them to lead the process.
Okay, thank you for that, Jack. And now back to you, Coletta. Will the African Union be represented at the inauguration of Tshisekedi, and will it endorse his administration?
Well, about representation during the inauguration, yes. The African Union Commission chairperson's office has confirmed that the African Union will be represented during the inauguration. And we also know that we do not know who will be sent from the AU Commission, but we know that there are countries within the SADC region which spoke as a bloc about the DRC issue, and we've seen countries from the SADC region where DRC falls congratulating Mr. Tshisekedi on his victory. South Africa has spoken, we saw Namibia, Tanzania has spoken, and also from the East African countries, we've seen Kenya, Burundi speaking. So we don't know who will go from the African Union Commission, but yes, there will be someone from the African Union Commission. There will be and there will be countries from the African Union. So far, we are sure about the ones who have congratulated him. About recognizing Tshisekedi's legitimacy, that is a story for probably some time beyond February. But as it stands, we have to remember the DRC is a sovereign state and deserves to choose whoever they want as a winner or as a president, and deserves to go, so long as it goes by the legal provisions of its constitution, then the African Union will not have any option but to respect what the DRC will come up with.
Okay, thank you very much. That was Coletta Wanjoy there for us in Addis Ababa on the African Union's position with regard to the election of Felix Tshisekedi, president of the DRC. And earlier, of course, we spoke to Jack Parrock in Brussels on the EU's position. Moving on to other news now. In Nigeria, the government has warned about an increase in violence before next month's elections. It's accused the main opposition of trying to foment unrest to jeopardize the vote.
Nigeria's Information Minister Lai Mohammed says the government has credible intelligence that the opposing People's Democratic Party was orchestrating widespread violence.
Having realized that their fortunes have dwindled badly ahead of the polls, the desperate opposition is orchestrating widespread violence with a view to truncating the elections, thus triggering a constitutional crisis that could snowball into the establishment of an interim government.
But the opposition PDP has dismissed the claims.
In the light of this, and the already displayed desperation by the APC ahead of the general election, the PDP calls on Nigerians to hold President Buhari directly responsible for any escalation of violence in our nation.
Africa's most populous nation goes to the polls to elect a new president and parliament on February 16th. It will be a close race between the two main parties. President Muhammadu Buhari of the All Progressive Congress is seeking a second term in office, while the PDP candidate Atiku Abubakar will be his closest rival. Security remains a major issue during campaigning, as Boko Haram Islamists are still active in the remote northeastern part of the country. But Buhari has also been fighting against graft in the country.
When it comes to the fight against corruption, we are trying our best, and those found guilty will be arrested and handed over to the police for further court investigation and to be punished.
On Sunday, former President Olusegun Obasanjo said he had serious doubts about the credibility of the election and cast doubt on the impartiality of the Electoral Commission. He has also accused Buhari of using the security services to target political opponents. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
Well, general election years in Nigeria have always been characterized by huge spending by politicians and political parties. Hundreds of millions of dollars are often spent on publicity, logistics, and even vote buying. But this year, things have been different. With just less than a month to the election, Nigerian politicians and their political parties are not doling out the cash as in the 2015 election. CGTN's Didi Badmus with the details now.
Around this time in 2015, Joseph Adedeji's printing press was a beehive of activities. There was simply too much work than he could cope with. He was kept busy printing political campaign posters for politicians running for public offices. 4 years on, it's a different story. His printing press remains idle most of the time. And it's not just him. It's the same for most of the printers around.
In 2015, we have a lot of jobs, printers, posters, flex, a lot of printing jobs for politicians. In 2019, we can't even compare it. There is no job, no posters, no any job. The little one outside now, you see, they give it to non-printers.
It's a very clear sign of the changing times in Nigerian politics, and it's thanks in part to the current government in the country. Shortly after he took office, President Muhammadu Buhari ordered a probe into the election spending of the previous government. A lot of legal cases over that probe now litter Nigerian courts, while recoveries have been made in some of the matters. And details have since emerged that over $1 billion of government money was pumped into that election.
I believe that one, the present economic situation in the country does not allow for such spending. Number two, the policy of the present government to ensure that public money is not available to politicians to spend, I think is another factor. I believe that this is a good picture for Nigeria to look at and to see that we should endeavor in future to ensure that whatever campaigns are being done under any constitution will reduce the amount of money being spent by politicians to get into elective office.
While the present situation might be good for the country's democracy, it's bad business for people like Joseph the printer.
I have a friend that just sold all his press. He just sold up all his press that he doesn't interest in doing printing again, because when the professional printers doesn't see any job to come to do.
And it's not just printers that are taking a direct hit. Political rallies too have become shorter, and the number has dropped dramatically. Even the country's media too is feeling the heat. The number of media campaigns has gone down as well across all the mainstream media. But the question is, for how long would this new normal last?
Because of the present situation and the government's, scrutiny on how money is spent, it does not mean that the next election will, not present a different situation economically, or the people in position then may, behave like the former politicians. So I cannot guarantee that in future this spending lavishly on election will not resurface itself.
Indeed, there's been some noticeable change in campaign spending, but one area everyone will be keeping a very close eye on is vote buying. It's very difficult to catch politicians there, especially when you have a voter who is willing to sell their votes. But one thing is certain: this general election may go down in the history of this country as one with the least spending by politicians. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
We're going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including UN rebukes Europe for failing to allow rescued migrants to make land. And Italy blames France for creating poverty in Africa.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The United Nations aid agencies have criticised European countries for not allowing migrants to disembark at safe ports. More than 140 people who were rescued at sea have been taken to a detention centre in Misrata in Libya.
According to migrant organizations, an estimated 170 migrants were lost in the Mediterranean in two incidents involving dinghies that left from Libya and Morocco. The International Organization for Migration says that 203 passengers have drowned at sea trying to reach Europe in January.
Currently, rescue at sea has been taken hostage by politics. There has been little progress in recent months, and decisive leadership that taps into fundamental values of humanity and compassion is sorely needed.
IOM adds that more than 4,800 migrants have arrived in some European countries, mainly Spain, Greece and Italy. Most of them, though, were detained on arrival.
I think it's been well documented at this point that the people in those detentions face pretty appalling treatment. Many report going hungry for days on end, not being able to receive dire urgent medical care that they require. Others alleged to have been tortured. And some of these centres, the non-official centres, are run by traffickers and smugglers, where we have no access to those at all. And even when, the official centres, when you have security incidents like we've seen cropping up now and again in recent weeks and months, our own access to the official centres is restricted by security concerns.
Private rescue ships have been restricted from conducting search and rescue operations in the Mediterranean Sea. And according to the UNHCR, the move has put more lives at unnecessary risk.
As we reported this past weekend, close to 170 lives are believed to have been lost in the two shipwrecks. The first, a vessel with 117 people on board that sank off Libya, and the second in waters between Morocco and Spain with 53 on board. Already this year, 4,507 people have crossed to Europe by sea, despite the bitter cold and great dangers the sea presents at this time of year.
The UNHCR spokesman insists that the rescue at sea has been taken hostage by politics. He further says that decisive leadership that taps into fundamental values of humanity and compassion is sorely needed for the matter to be resolved. Hlonela Lupuwana, CGTN.
France's foreign ministry has summoned Teresa Castaldo, Italy's ambassador to Paris, in an escalating altercation over migrant arrivals from North Africa. Emmanuel Macron's government has been at loggerheads with Italy's far-right populist coalition over the matter. Both Italy's heads, Matteo Salvini and Luigi Di Maio, are accusing France of impoverishing Africa by stealing their wealth. They're blaming their neighbour for Libya's current situation. Well, to discuss this further, we are now joined in our Lagos studio by Professor Bola Akinta-Inwa, former Director General of the Nigeria Institute for International Affairs. He joins us from Lagos. Thank you very much for joining us. Italy has come out alleging that France is responsible for people leaving the continent because they say France has never stopped colonizing African states. What are your thoughts on these allegations?
Well, I will say that Italy is rightly wrong. In other words, Italy is right to an extent, and Italy is also wrong. Right only to the extent that there are elements of truth. There is no disputing the fact that France still maintains a colonial type of relationship with many African countries. But when we say Italy is wrong because the country refuses to understand that the countries referred to as colonized as being the victims of French colonialism. They don't look at it as if they are being exploited by the French, the way the Italians are putting it. So in this case, on the one hand, from the perspective of Italy, they look at colonization as if the French are oppressing the Francophone Africans. But the Francophone African leaders themselves look at this completely differently. And that is why, for instance, the French, whenever they are accused of this type of colonization or recolonization, the French government will readily give an answer that they are in Africa on the basis of invitation, and that the countries of Africa have the sovereign right to determine who to relate with. So in this case, Italy is right and is equally wrong.
Okay, well, so it's obviously a complex situation there. We know that Africa is rich in natural resources. To what extent, would you say, do Western countries take advantage of the resources there, and how badly is West Africa affected?
You see, I only need to take you beyond West Africa. Let's look at the whole continent of Africa. The issue is that if you take a closer look at the development projects in the whole continent, what we observe is that the European countries, who are normally referred to as development partners, they are responsible for more than 75% of funding of the development projects. Now, if the development partners, the European countries, the former colonial masters, if they are responsible for more than 75% of Africa's development projects, then you must expect that the domineering impact, influence of Europe cannot but be underscored. This is the bitter truth. So when we talk about a bad situation, etc., all along, the question to ask African leaders is, why is it that they are unable to fund their development projects? Why is it that they must always depend on other countries for their survival? We are independent, fine, politically. But the truth is that we are independently dependent on countries. And this brings us to the policy of non-alignment of Nigeria in particular. The policy, many people misinterpret it to mean that Nigeria will not side with the West, will not side with the East or with any country. But according to Tafawa Balewa, the fact is that non-alignment as a policy of Nigeria is Nigeria to determine who to align with and who not to align with. That is the policy. So the same thing is happening with the Francophones now, for instance, who will normally align themselves with France. And linked to the first question you will see, that is why we are having this type of situational reality on our hands. And
Professor, just finally, briefly, if you could please, what would you say is the root cause of Africans wanting to go to Europe? And is poverty and colonization or former colonization part of the problem, would you say?
You see, the general reason normally given by any observer is that they are going to Europe for greener pasture. But the question to ask is, why do they opt to go to Europe for greener pasture? Why wouldn't a Nigerian leave Nigeria, go to Ethiopia, go to Kenya for greener pasture? The issue is that the situational reality in many African countries is very inclement, all right? There is insecurity of the stomach, insecurity of education, insecurity of living. And now where you have countries preaching the gospel of human rights, they give you protection, you are safe, no armed robbers, no kidnapping. These are the conditions prompting many people. If you take Nigeria, for example, and from my experience as a former Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, we now discover that, look, in Africa, like in Nigeria in particular, patriotism is not encouraged. Dint of hard work is not encouraged. Honesty of purpose is not encouraged. And people who are used to dint of hard work, honesty, dignity, there's no way they want to stay in Nigeria. They have to export themselves abroad. I think this is just the major dynamic for all this, rather than putting it under the general framework of going for greener pasture. Okay. We need to make the African environment more conducive for people to work and develop Africa.
Okay, thank you very much for your thoughts on that. That was Professor Bola Akinta-Inwa, former Director General of the Nigeria Institute for International Affairs, joining us there. Moving on to other news now, the High Court in Zimbabwe has ruled that the internet shutdown in the country is illegal. High Court Judge Owen Tagu has requested mobile operators to immediately and unconditionally resume full service. Zimbabwe's government ordered the sporadic blackout last Tuesday when protests against the rise in fuel prices turned violent. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala has more.
Zimbabwe's government has exceeded its mandate in ordering an internet blackout.
The first relief that we sought was that the directive issued by the minister with effect from the 14th and subsequent days be suspended. We also sought a relief that the internet, the mobile internet service providers be ordered to offer unrestricted access. As you are aware, they were playing hide and seek with subscribers, sometimes offering restricted internet access where certain platforms were not accessible.
The High Court has ordered the government to restore full internet to the country.
What the court has done here is to actually grant that order and go further and actually set aside the directive that had been issued by the minister. Why the court set aside the directive was because of a finding that has been made by the court to the effect that the directive was issued by the minister, who has no power in terms of the Enabling Act to issue such a directive. The power to issue a directive in terms of the Interceptions of Communications Act was reserved to the president himself, no other person but the president.
Authorities in Zimbabwe closed the internet for much of last week. Over the weekend, it restored partial internet but kept a blackout on certain social media apps.
He has the capacity to solve. That is, if he employs all the strategies on his desk, he has all the resources, he has the people. And you must also realize that he's a manager of 15, 16 million people. So you must have the power, the authority to instruct what you think is the best for the people of Zimbabwe, for the country, and even for the continent and beyond.
There was no immediate comment from the internet firms or from the government lawyers on whether it would appeal the judgment. Zimbabwe has experienced turmoil for the past week over fuel price hikes. Most shops and businesses have reopened in the capital, Harare, although many people are stocking up on food items in case the country faces further unrest. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
A South African former executive has told a corruption investigation that his old company had paid monthly bribes for years to a minister who served under former President Jacob Zuma. Angelo Agrizzi is the ex-chief operating officer of the Bosasa contracting company. He's given days of bombshell testimony to a judicial commission probing allegations of government corruption under Zuma. Agrizzi said that he was responsible for counting and packing $3,600 in cash, which was to be delivered each month to Nomvula Mokonyane, who is now the Minister of Environmental Affairs. The practice continued from 2002 until 2016.
You accompanied Mr. Watson, Mr. Gavin Watson, on occasion when he and you then would see the minister.
That's correct.
And in relation to your particular functions prior to the meeting, you say that you were instructed to pack cash or what?
The monopoly money, the cash.
A Somali company is taking advantage of plastic waste in the capital Mogadishu by recycling it into roofing tiles and other products. The enterprise is making a profit while at the same time slashing the problem of litter in the city.
Have you ever considered that the litter around you could possibly be very valuable? Well, a company in Somali's capital Mogadishu is finding it to be a reality. As the Muslim nation struggles to rebuild after over 2 decades of conflict, Somali EnviroGreen Company has found a way to make a fortune out of waste and create employment in the process.
We carry the waste on our heads and backs. We get 3,000 Somali shillings for each kilo of plastic waste. Thank God, it's a nice job. We survive on this. We need cars to transport the trash because of our health.
The The littering has been menace polluting the environment, air and water in the region, and the government is finding it difficult to control the problem due to the limited funds available.
We have decided to recycle plastic because there's too much garbage, including plastics and paper bags that are left to litter the city. This has caused problems to the people living here. The problem has also moved to the ocean and is causing problems for animals living in the ocean.
Some of the items produced include tiles.
We will produce many products from this recycling plant. At the moment, we produce tiles which are in demand among the local population because of the quality. The tiles we produce are much better than imported ones that are made from cement and soil.
The world reportedly generates at least 3.5 million tons of plastic and other solid waste a day. Much of this finds its way to the environment and water sources, causing major pollution. However, this Somali recycling plant has become a gem, providing solutions to the pollution menace while creating wealth for the people. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
Let's now go to Ucha for all the latest in the business news world. Over to you.
Thank you, Karen. And coming up on Africa Live Biz, South Africa considers a short-term bailout for Zimbabwe. And the IMF revises Nigeria's economic outlook for 2019 down.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN. Well, let's start off with the latest on Zimbabwe's deadly unrest. South Africa is considering extending a short-term bailout to its troubled neighbor. Now, South Africa's Foreign Minister Lindiwe Sisulu has said the bailout discussions will be held on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos. Sisulu plans to meet Zimbabwe's Finance Minister Ntuli Nkube over the proposals. The bailout will, however, be determined by South Africa's ability to step in and rescue Zimbabwe. Now, at least 12 people have been killed in the country since protests began over hikes in fuel prices. Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa has been forced to cancel his participation at WEF to attend to the protests at home. Of course, South Africa last week turned down Zimbabwe's request for a $1.2 billion loan. Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund has sliced Nigeria's GDP projections for this year to 2%. That's down from 2.3%, which it had predicted for the West African state previously. The multilateral institution attributed its decision to lower the country's growth projection by 0.3% points to the current softening prices of crude oil. However, the IMF has anticipated in its latest report that growth in sub-Saharan Africa is expected to pick up from 2.9% in 2018 to about 3.5% this year. Now, the 49th Annual World Economic Forum has officially kicked off in the alpine town of Davos in Switzerland. The focus of the forum is on globalization in the age of the fourth industrial revolution. Political leaders taking part this year include the Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, President of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, and German Chancellor Angela Merkel. US President Donald Trump as well as UK Prime Minister Theresa May are skipping this year's meeting due to a government shutdown as well as a Brexit deadlock. Now, the annual event is also a key place for bilateral meetings between heads of state, the bigwigs and other dignitaries who have plenty to discuss behind closed doors.
China is now at the forefront of innovation, technological process. I think China has taken a lead also in artificial intelligence, in self-driving cars. So China can contribute based on its experience, but China has also to contribute because it plays a major role in the world.
Now, Now, of course, this year's Davos summit comes as the International Monetary Fund has revised down its global growth forecast for the coming year. And CGTN's Guy Henderson tells us more from Davos.
There's no global recession round the corner, says the IMF, but economic growth is set to slow and governments need to get their act together.
And the message is the following for policymakers: address remaining vulnerabilities and be ready if a serious slowdown were to materialize.
The warning came in Davos, Switzerland, where business and political leaders are gathering for the World Economic Forum.
When they gathered here 12 months ago, there was a sense of relief, some optimism that the global economy finally seemed to be getting back on its feet. The mood has changed here now. And even the IMF admits that in this unpredictable global environment, their forecast may yet be thrown off again.
US President Donald Trump may have a hand in that. He cancelled his trip to Davos to focus on the government shutdown back home. If that drags on, the world's largest economy is bound to feel the effect. Another deal that's yet to be brokered, one to end Washington's trade war with China, whose government reported on Monday its slowest annual growth rate since 1990. And then there's that great unknown, Brexit. A disorderly withdrawal could provide another unwelcome economic shock. Britain's Prime Minister Theresa May stayed home too. For several Western leaders, in fact, this gathering of the global elite is not the place to be seen right now. Critics are vocal.
The people in Davos, the big company leaders and the political leaders, are part of the problem. They are the problem, and we want them to be the solution to ending extreme inequality, because it's out of control, it's widening, it's hurting our economy, slowing our economies, it's undermining democracy, it is trapping people in poverty. So I'm here to call for action.
Growing inequality will be part of the discussion here in the coming days too, even with more haves in the room than have-nots. Guy Henderson, CGTN, Davos.
And moving on now, technology is bringing about big change to Africa's farming sector, with tools like mobile phones as well as drone cameras offering new possibilities. Now, CGTN's Ira Spitzer tells us these developments are not only being watched within Africa, but outside the continent as well.
Africa's farmers and the crops they grow are a hot topic at this agricultural fair in Germany's capital. But it's the big technological changes to the sector that have people here at Berlin's International Green Week talking and coming up with business ideas.
An app that links you
like this farm-in-a-box product from the American firm AGCO, offering demand-based equipment rental and training through an app.
What this is trying to do is to empower an African entrepreneur to be able to offer farming by the hour, if you will, or mechanization by the hour.
Africa's farmers have already benefited from things like real-time market information and natural disaster management through tools like mobile phones and drone cameras. Here at this business forum, government officials and business people from Germany and Africa are discussing opportunities for investment in Africa. African agriculture could play a critical role in feeding the planet's growing population. It's estimated the continent is home to about 65% of the world's remaining uncultivated fertile land. That will have implications for the smallholder farmers who make up more than half of the population of sub-Saharan Africa.
I think from now to 10 to 20 years, we will still have small farm in West Africa, but it will depend on the type of crop.
He says he expects vegetables to continue to be harvested by small farms, but the scale required for crops like maize and wheat may force many into other occupations. But he believes the economic benefits of increased agriculture, with the aid of technology, will create more jobs in the long run. And that increase will be needed to feed billions of new people within Africa's borders and beyond. Ira Spitzer, CGTN, Berlin.
Well, that's all for now in Africa Live Biz. But coming up on Global Business Africa, Climate change, global economic growth and trade relations in focus at the World Economic Forum in Davos. We'll bring you more on that at top of the hour. For now, it's back to you, Karen.
Thank you very much, Ucha. Well, we are going to a short break. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including... In Gambia, the long-awaited bridge over River Gambia is inaugurated. And South Africa's hip-hop crews going to compete in Croatia.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Burkina Faso, President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore has appointed economist Christophe Joseph-Marie Dabire as the new Prime Minister. This comes 72 hours after the resignation of Paul Kabatieba and his entire cabinet. So far, no reason has been given for the former Prime Minister's resignation. For several months now, however, the Burkinabe government has been facing social upheaval due to the price increase of consumer goods, in addition to kidnappings and terrorist attacks in the country. The appointment of a new Prime Minister is seen as a step forward in ensuring stability in Burkina Faso. Christophe Dabire will have the difficult task of fighting insecurity in a country often confronted with jihadist attacks and inter-ethnic violence. He's expected to form his government in the coming days.
In order to breathe life into the expectations of the Burkinabe people, it was necessary to bring in someone new. In any case, we believe that he can give a new vision to politics in Burkina Faso, on the economic security front and on the social front.
This appointment is welcome, but it is very early for us to give our opinion. He will be judged on results. However, we hope that he will be a hard-working Prime Minister, will be able to restore peace and, above all, security.
We have noticed that he has extensive experience, but we still want to see him at work first. And if I have any advice for him, it is to be firm, because right now in our very dear country, without firmness, one can achieve nothing at all. Paul Kabatieba spent his time negotiating. I guess he wasn't used to the type of situations he was facing because, as the media say, he was a technocrat. I think that is where he failed.
The Gambian President Adama Barrow and his Senegalese counterpart Macky Sall have inaugurated the long-awaited bridge over the River Gambia in the former town of Farafenni. The Senegambia Bridge is expected to help trade and travel in the wider West Africa region after decades of delays. The bridge project dates from the 1970s but faced numerous delays due to the changing relations between Dakar and Banjul. Construction finally began in 2015. The two leaders have welcomed the new development, insisting that it will boost trade relations.
This magnificent bridge will henceforth be a major component of the Trans-Gambia corridor. A corridor that is essential for development, integration, trade expansion within the ECOWAS sub-region.
We can be proud to have brought to reality the dream of several generations.
The best of South Africa's hip-hop crews will be going for gold at the 2019 Dance Star World Masters in Croatia later this year. The street star dancing competition attracts thousands of children. Local crews recently qualified by dancing their way through the Global Dance Supreme qualifiers. CGTN's Julie Scher filed this report.
Excitement is building as South African hip-hop crews Quarantine Rebellion prepare to face off against 28 other countries at this year's Dance World Masters in Croatia.
What I like about this competition is there's so many dance styles. So you have ballet, you have contemporary, you have tap, you have hip-hop, street dance. This is the ultimate dance style winner. So basically what happens is every country sends their best dance groups, soloist styles, but in every genre, from ages 6 to all the way to 35 years old. So to us, it means the world, because I know dance doesn't have the Olympics, but that's how we compare it to the Olympics.
For many crew members, some as young as 7, this will be their first shot at representing their team on the international stage.
I love dancing, and we don't do it just for fun. We do it because we want to do dancing, and we'll put in the efforts, and now we've just made it to go to Croatia.
I think our team is reaching to win in Croatia and to have lots of fun, and our goal is to become #1 and represent South Africa.
South African dance crews bring a different flair to the competition. They draw inspiration from local artists and dance styles such as Kwaito, Pantsula and Spuja, bagging them medals for the last 2 years.
The judges don't want to see copycats, so they don't want to see something they can see on YouTube or see online. And I think even this year, the SA team is going to take it again, because the standard here is just growing, and that's what is so nice to see, that South Africa is not anymore seen as a country that doesn't actually know or understand the dance industry, but we're right up there.
Team South Africa will show 28 countries and more than 4,000 dancers what they're made of, and they will be chasing gold.
Whatever the move we do, it could be a simple move like a hand, but the way our dancers do it, we've trained them so well. That passion you see on that stage from these kids, you'll never find it anywhere. So we are pushing our crews for gold this year.
These young crews will soon battle it out in Croatia, and they hope their best moves will rule the world. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
We've got all the sport coming up after the break, including South Africa's Banyana set sights on Sweden following friendly against the Netherlands.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken,